What is up, people? BP here, and today we are going to be looking at this book right here called Martyrs Mirror, also known as Martyrs Mirror of the Defenseless Christians. And it is the story of 17 centuries of Christian martyrdom from the time of Christ until 1660 AD. And this was written by Thelman J. Van Brott in the 1600s. And essentially, he had access to many ancient writers like St. Augustine and also Josephus and others, and Eusebius and so on, but he also had he also had access to public records and even edicts of ancient kings back in those days that would send out these edicts and these commands to essentially assassinate anybody who did not associate with like the Roman Catholic Church or even the Roman Catholic Empire. I'm trying to think, the Holy Roman Empire, which was German, essentially. But anyways, so, yeah, there would be, like, certain kings back in those days, and they would send these edicts declaring that all Christians who did not adhere to the Holy Roman Catholic faith would be put to death, and their goods confiscated, and, and their descendants banished from the land, and so on. But what's interesting is that what they would say in these edicts actually fulfilled prophecy, because what they would say is, and if you do this, you'll be doing God and the king a great service, which fulfills John chapter 16, which says, "These things have I spoken unto you, that you should not be offended. They shall put you out of the synagogues. Yea, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God service. And these things will they do unto you, because they have not known the Father nor me. But these things have I told you, that when the time shall come, ye may remember that I told you of them." So Jesus told his original disciples, look, there's going to be a time when they're going to put you out of the synagogues, out of the churches, out of the mosques, out of the religious establishments, and also that anyone that's going to kill you in the future is going to think that they're doing God a service. And he also said this, "And these things they will do unto you, because they have not known the Father nor me." And now that's the most interesting part of it all, because Jesus knew that one day there would be people who would adhere to the Christian doctrine and kill other Christians in the name of God, in the name of Jesus Christ, in his name. And he said, "But these things will they do unto you, because they have not known the Father nor me." They were not genuine born-again Christians. That's why you hear a lot of people out there attacking Christianity and saying, well, religion is the reason why there were so many deaths and so many problems in the world. And it's like, no, my friend. If people had actually adhered to the teachings of Jesus himself, they would have not done these things. Instead, they would have done peaceful things. They would have enriched the land and enriched the people and actually got rid of the evildoers, not the peaceful, God-fearing Christians. You understand there's a big difference here. So, and the Bible specifically says that he that rules over men must rule in the fear of God. And that was one thing they did not do, was fear God. So a lot of people like myself believe that those who genuinely, people like myself believe that those who did the persecutions were actually agnostics, atheists, unbelievers to some degree. But they were prancing around as though they were religious. And it's like, no, you're not a believer. You're just using the Christian religion to further your own plan, I guess. I can't even think of it. Your own agenda, and that reminds me of people like Anders Breivik. I don't know if you remember that guy, but he was a mass murderer in places like, in Norway. He was a mass murderer in Norway, and even he himself was an atheist agnostic, and he admitted to using the Christian basics. Like, he saw it was good for some things, but he genuinely did not believe in God. He genuinely did not have a relationship with Jesus Christ, and he admitted it on record, and he killed these people. And what happened after that? Well, people started blaming Christianity for those atrocities. So, once again, we have Jesus Christ explaining to us, the church, that they will do these things because they have not known the Father nor me. So I think I've made this a point. I just wanted to give this as an introduction before we jump right into this story, which is going to be taken from page 117 of Martyrs Mirror. We're going to be reading about Photinus. We're going to be reading about Alcibiades, I'm sorry, I can't even say his name, and Epiphanes of Lyons. I'm going to do my best. So bear with my reading. It sucks. But yeah, I'm going to do my best so you guys can be educated. And if you guys have found my channel for the first time, my friend, you have found an internet gem. This channel is so precious, you don't even realize it, okay? And it's probably the most unpopular and unknown Christian YouTube channel on the internet, but I guarantee you it's a diamond in the rough because the stuff I cover on here is so interesting and so cool that how could you not like this channel? So I'm very proud of the fact that this channel is not very well known, and it's a very small sort of channel, but it's a very good one. And yeah, I don't get a lot of views and all that, but that's okay because it's not about the numbers here. It's about the difference you make. So anyways, guys, let's go ahead and jump right into this little story here. And I hope you enjoy this. And if you guys like my content, please feel free to share it. And yeah, hopefully one day it could go from a small channel to a big channel. Because guess what? He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And I think I could be faithful over a good large channel. So that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm shooting for. But if it never happens, hey man, this is the most coolest channel you'll ever see. So, all right, enough rambling from me, guys. We're going to go ahead and jump right into this and enjoy. What is up, people? So let's go ahead and jump right into this story. It's going to be a good one if I can just hold it together and read as smoothly as possible so you guys can enjoy this little reading. And yeah, let's go ahead and get with page 117. It says, an old man of 90 years old called Photinus, miserably maltreated for the testimony of Jesus Christ before the tribunal at Lyons in France, who afterwards died in the prison about the year 179. And I apologize if you hear that loud ringing noise in the background. That is my AC unit, as you can see, behind the bars, so nobody can get to me here in the hood. Wow, my camera is not... Oh, there we go. Woo! It's got that old vintage crazy look to it. Freaking love this camera, bro. I bought this for like 12 bucks at Bell's Outlet. All right, so it says, in Eusebius's church history, as well as several other ancient writers, mention is made of a certain old man of more than 90 years old called Photinus, a teacher of the church at Lyons in France. It is stated of him that on account of his great age, he could not walk, but having such a burning desire to die for the name of Christ, he, as A. Malinus has recorded, had himself carried before the judgment seat in order to be sentenced to death with the other martyrs. When he was brought to the tribunal by the soldiers, the magistracy of the city of Lyons, and the whole multitude of the people followed him and began to cry out that he was a Christian, together with much calumniating and abusive language. Eusebius says that as this old man stood before the judge at the tribunal, the common people began to cry, "This is Christ himself." When the judge thereupon asked him who the God of the Christians was, he answered with remarkable candor, If thou art worthy of it, thou shalt know. This displeased the judge so greatly that he commanded that this pious witness of Jesus should be struck in his face with fists. Upon this, he was most unmercifully pushed, kicked, pulled, and knocked by the bystanders and thrown at with whatever they could get a hold of, without regard to the feebleness of his age, that yea, they considered those accomplices with him who did not show enough diligence in assaulting and every way abusing this aged man. Wow, so this guy was in his 90s, and they were just pummeling him and beating him, and just really did not have any regard for old people back then. Sounds kind of like today, if you ask me, really. All right, so Photinus, having been thus maltreated, yea, nearly beaten to death, so that life seemed almost extinct, was taken from the tribunal back into prison, where after 2 days of great misery, having commended his soul into the hands of God, he died, and thus attained to a blessed end. So Jesus foretold, he said, if they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. And he also said, the servant is not greater than his master, but everyone that is perfect shall be as his master. So just as Jesus was beaten and crucified and tormented and tortured, so too his followers have been treated just like him in history, as we just read with this gentleman here. Hang on one second. Let me try to fix this. Oh, come on, $12 camera. Work for me. Work with me here. Oh, goodness. Almost got it. Oh. Wow. You can really see my room now. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next story here. Alcibiades, I can't even say his name. Alcibiades. These are some hard names to pronounce. A pious Christian martyrdom. We'll just call him Al. I don't know his name. A pious Christian martyred at Lyons in France about the year 179. In the letter of the church at Lyons in Vienna. Vienna? I'm so sorry. My reading comprehension was probably rated at a at a 5th grade reading level. So I'm sorry. But I did graduate high school. That's for sure. All right, there is mentioned among various pious martyrs who suffered for the name of Jesus Christ, Alcibiades, of whom it is stated that he held a very retired and austere life, his diet consisting of nothing but salt, bread, and water. This manner of life he also wished to continue in prison, but being instructed by the pious man Attalus that thereby he would leave to his brethren and fellow martyrs a seeming reproach for a luxurious life, if they would not do likewise, he thenceforth partook also of other food with thankfulness. However, this did not last long, since he was soon deprived not only of food, but of life itself. For in the aforementioned letter he is called a martyr, which was generally understood to mean one of those who suffered a violent death for the name of Jesus, the Son of God, and had valiantly passed through the conflict. All right, we're going to move on to Epipodius of Lyons and Alexander the Greek, martyred for the testimony of the evangelical truth at Lyons in France, the one beheaded and the other crucified about the year 179. Now, what's fascinating about reading these stories is that you can actually, if you're of European descent, you could trace your own personal lineage to these people that lived in these days back in Europe. Because there's a good chance that if you're of Anglo-Saxon European descent, you probably have ancestors that were Christian that were persecuted for their faith. This was such a common thing back then that some writers have estimated that it was over 60 million Christians were put to death for their faith. And a lot of those people were killed under the Roman Catholic Church, unfortunately, because I feel like the Roman Catholic Church, it breaks my heart, because the Roman Catholic Church had so much potential to successfully evangelize the world. It was so close to the truth. I mean, if you really study Roman Catholicism, their belief system, their doctrines, everything that they taught, believed, and exercised in that church was so close to the true faith of Christianity that it's almost scary that they actually could do things like this to other fellow believers. They were so close, man. And the fact that they're like, I mean, it's like milliseconds off the mark. I mean, literally, like if you were somebody who was going to, shoot a target, right? And you shoot and you miss it by a hairbreadth. That's the difference between hitting the mark and missing the mark. That's what Roman Catholicism is like when it comes to Christianity. They're just a smidge off the mark, just barely missed it. And that's what makes this religion so dangerous, I guess, because it's like they're so close to the truth that it looks almost just like the real thing, but it's not. And the people they were killing were the real believers. So it's quite a shame, honestly, because they really did have the potential to fully evangelize the world. They had the money, the people, the resources, and even the physical brick and mortar buildings to bring people in. But they had control. But like I said, they were just off the mark, man. And a lot of the people that were involved in that church were unfortunately agnostic or atheists, especially the clergy. And I hate this camera as it is set up right now. This looks really bad. Okay, but you guys are not looking at me. You're going to look at this text. So we're just going to focus on that. All right. Where were we? All right. So in the 17th year of, so let me get back to reading. All right. In the 17th year of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, there were slain among other pious martyrs at Lyons in France, Epipodius, a citizen of Lyons, and Alexander, a Greek by birth, whose imprisonment, suffering, and death occurred in this wise. When the heathen thought that the Christian name was entirely extirpated, at Lyons in Vienna, and that no person who confessed it was remaining, these two, as the remainder of the Christians there, were betrayed, accused, and 3 days afterwards placed before the tribunal of the governor. There they were interrogated in regard to their name and confession of faith, to which questions they candidly replied. Their answers enraged the judge beyond measure, and he commanded that Epipodius, who was the principal speaker, should be smitten on the cheek, which was done in such a manner that he bled from his nose and mouth. But this made this champion of Christ, though he was still young, only the bolder and firmer. And he said, I confess that Christ with the Father and the Holy Ghost is the only true God, and I deem it right that I should pour out my soul, that is my life, for him who is my creator, my redeemer. For thus my life will not be taken from me, but changed into a better one. Besides, it matters but little how and what manner this weak body is released and separated from the soul, only so that the soul be returned to God, its creator. When Epipodius had in steadfastness finished this confession, he was suspended at the command of the judge on a stake, on both sides of which the executioners stood, drawing deep gashes with cutting hooks or claws into his sides. In the meantime, the raging multitude cried that he should be stoned to death or torn limb from limb, for the judge was too slow in pronouncing his sentence of death. Then the judge had him brought out with great haste and beheaded, and thus this pious witness of the Son of God attained to a blessed end. Alexander, the above-mentioned Greek, was brought out of prison 2 days after the death of his beloved brother Epipodius, and placed before the tribunal, where he defended himself most cheerfully, manifesting at the same time his great desire to be counted among the number of his slain brethren and sisters. The judge immediately commanded that Alexander should be stripped and beaten by 3 executioners with sticks, cudgels, etc. But in all these torments, he steadfastly called upon God for help and succor. In short, the sentence of death was pronounced upon him, namely that he should die on the cross. The executioners then tied him on the cross, but having previously been wounded by many stripes to such a degree that his bones or bare ribs were visible, as well as the vital parts of his viscera, namely the lungs, the liver, the heart, etc., which could be observed moving, he gave up the ghost before the executioners could inflict further tortures upon him. And thus in steadfastness he died a blessed death. When this had taken place, he was buried with his friend Epipodius, who had been beheaded on the 24th of April, 179. So I think just to kind of summarize what we read here, Epipodius basically was put on a cross just like his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. and they slowly cut his skin off and exposed his organs, his heart, his lungs, and so on, so that you could actually see these things. This is the horror that these people suffered. And it's not that these people suffered this. They actually committed these crimes against God himself, which is why he says in Matthew chapter 25, he says, depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was in prison, and you visited me not. And so on and so forth. And the people respond, this is prophecy, by the way. The people respond, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or naked or in prison or sick and did not minister unto you? And he said, for as much as you have not done it unto the one of the least of these, you have not done it unto me. And so those people go into everlasting punishment, and the righteous into life eternal. And that's what happened here, was these men, these evil men, committed these crimes not just against the believers, but against God himself, who came to dwell with man inside his heart. These were crimes not just against humanity, but crimes against their Creator, against the one who gave them life and gives them breath and food on a daily basis. This is the horror that these people went through back then and still experience to this day, and we just don't always hear about it. But it does happen. Even in this country, even in America, there is Christian persecution, but you don't hear about it all the time. Sometimes you do, sometimes it makes it to the news, and sometimes it does not. But see, what happened is a lot of what the persecution took place back then happens more so under the table, hit more so in secret. And there's been books written about that. For example, Alberto by Alberto Rivera from Chick Publications, he details that the church is still committing persecution to this day. And a lot of it is done in secret, and you just don't hear about it. So let me try to see if I can get that for you. Alberto Chick Publications. If you ever get a chance to read this book, it's in comic book form, but it's this right here. So I don't know if you can see that, but Alberto, what a great comic book. I'll have to read it to you guys when you get a chance. Okay, so moving on. Leonidas, Plutarchus, and others put to death for the name of Christ about the year 180. Leonidas, Plutarchus, and others who had attained to the Christian faith were now visited with many torments and put to death for the name of Christ. What transpired with the Christians, and by the way, they give the reference right there, what transpired with the Christians during the fourth persecution. This persecution caused an unexpected and terrible pestilence which devastated countries and inhabitants, especially Italy, so that the Christians were forgotten, for there were villages that had been ravaged to such an extent that they became entirely depopulated and lay there waste and without inhabitants. Likewise, that besides the preceding martyrs whom we have mentioned by name, there were also put to death during the preceding persecutions the two pious men, Sigerius and Thracius, together with other believing Christians, as shown from Eusebius Pamphilus in the first book of his history. Okay, so we have not even scratched the surface yet. We are in just the 2nd century, about the year 180 AD. All right, mind you, when the 12 disciples went and evangelized the world back in those days, all right, we're talking about between 30 AD and 100 AD. That was when the disciples went out and evangelized, and that's why we have the book of Acts, okay? What happened was they went and evangelized the world, and there was an explosion of Christianity, so much so with the writings of Paul and Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and all the others in the New Testament. There was an explosion of Christianity, so much so that entire cities And towns were converted to Christianity, and it became such a problem to the idol worshipers back then that that they actually would destroy entire villages, entire cities, and so on. So we're only reading about just a few people, really, just in the 2nd century AD. But as you can see here, it says that this persecution caused an unexpected and terrible pestilence which devastated countries and inhabitants, especially Italy, so that the Christians were forgotten. For there were villages that had been ravaged to such an extent that they became entirely depopulated and lay there waste and without inhabitants. Fascinating stuff. And this is only the 2nd century. Mind you, we're about to read and cover 1,700 centuries in this book. Just this one book. And this literally just details like a couple stories. I mean, there's a lot. Obviously, it's a huge book. But, I mean, think about that. We're only scratching the surface. This is like the tip of the iceberg. And if you know anything about an iceberg, when you look at an iceberg, there's like, just a little bit that's above the surface. And sometimes it's really gigantic. If you go to the Arctic and whatnot, it's gigantic to look at. But when you look below the surface, it's unbelievably much larger. Let's see. True size of an iceberg. Look at this. If you can only imagine how big that really is. And I wish my search engine would kind of show a bit more. But if you could if I can kind of make this bigger. I mean, if you look at that, this represents church history, okay? Church history, what we know is here at the top. This would be like Martyrs Mirror, okay? What we don't know is below the surface. We've only scratched the surface of Christian history. And I don't even think 5 lifetimes could really go into this entire book. I mean, I'm going to make an attempt to read as much as I can while I'm still alive. And if YouTube is even still relevant in the future, I don't know. I mean, 10, 20 years from now, who knows what'll be the next big thing. I don't even know if YouTube will be even relevant, or if they'll, maybe invent a second internet or something. Who knows? But all I can say is I only have so much time to cover as much church history as I can, and you're going to have to do some due diligence of your own just to kind of get a picture of what went on. This is just scratching the surface. We haven't even gotten into the persecution given out by the Catholic Church, which some historians claim over 60 million people. 60 million. I've read numbers like that. Like, what is that? That's, okay, if the United States is about 350 million, all right, that's like Dallas, Fort Worth, New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, and Houston, St. Paul, Minnesota, Chicago, like 7 cities all combined. And that still does not even reach 60 million people. Like, that blows my mind. So if you can imagine, that's just the Catholic Church. That's just from, like, I don't know, what is that? Maybe 1000 AD to about the year 1800. The actual recorded history of the Catholic Church's persecution. And if we were to take a look at like the Catholic Church's underground library, okay, if you go to the Vatican, I'll see if I can pull it up. You'll find a library below the surface. Vatican Library underground. Stretch for miles. Let's see if they got any pictures of that. So underneath the Vatican, if you go there, I don't even think, aha. So here's like one little picture, okay? if you go to the Vatican, okay, and only certain clergymen have access to this library. If you go there, what they did is they took the Vatican Church would record events throughout history. So that would be like wars and edicts and commandments from the Pope to other kings. But also they would record tribunals, councils, things that would occur between a judge and a Christian. So when they would take these Bible believers like Anabaptists, the Waldensians, and so on, what they would do is they would judge them and interrogate them and record every little thing that they would say in the courtroom. They would shorthand it, okay? Now, I'm not sure if these are all written in shorthand. I doubt it. But what would happen is they would record what would happen, and then they would put it in a book, and then they would seal it and put it in the Vatican for God only knows for what. I mean, maybe just to keep records. So just like, Washington, D.C. keeps records for a long time. I mean, they box it up and put it, in their storage facilities underground. And then after so many years, they expunge that. But that's kind of what the Catholic Church did, still does to this day. And underground, you have miles and miles and miles of books. And part of those books basically detail the lives of Christians. I mean, this is just incredible. A lot of it is written in Latin. Others written in the languages spoken back then, French, English, so on, Spanish, Italian, you name it. But these are books from all over the world, and it's hidden underground in the Vatican. And one day those books will be revealed according to the book of Revelation. And this all ties in with Martyrs Mirror. If I can only get to Revelation 17, I think it is. Maybe it's 18. Let's see. Here it is. So if I can just get this right. Come on. No. Okay, but let me see if I can read it, and you guys can just listen. All right. So it says, and in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. I know you can't really see that, but so the Bible basically foretells the end of the Catholic Church, that one day the blood of the slain will no longer be concealed. That one day the blood of the Christians will be revealed. And this is talking about the whore of Babylon, which is that, it says in verse 18, the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. It's talking about the woman that sits on 7 hills. If you know anything about the Catholic Church, it sits on 7 hills. One of those hills is Vaticanus. And those 7 hills represents the 7 nations, or the 7 divided up kingdoms in the world. Supercontinents, I guess. Anyways, so that's basically it, people. If you get a chance to do some research to kind of show you what I'm talking about, feel free to investigate for yourself. But yeah, I don't know if you learned anything. You probably didn't make it this far, and if you did, it's probably like 2 or 3 people, if that, maybe 1 person, because my channel is just so unknown. And this is almost like top secret information that I'm telling to you from a biblical perspective, because, well, the Bible basically lays it out completely. But anyways, so yeah, but it's funny, or I guess you could say it's not funny, but it's quite interesting that this book right here, we actually have this in possession, that we have access to. And the reason why we have it is because, well, Thelman J. Van Braght had access to public records back then in the Netherlands and in other various parts, where he could go and see what these Christians were saying and what they were asked, what testimonies they were giving in those days to the tribunals, to the judges, to the courts. And he basically just took all those stories and letters from families and compiled it into a book. So this thing is hundreds of years old. Doesn't look hundreds of years old, but that's because I bought it from the online Christian bookstore, which you can do as well. Find it on eBay and wherever. But yeah, this is an ancient book, hundreds of years old. 1660, that was only 50 years after the publication of the King James Version of the Bible, which there was plenty of English versions back then in those days. But the King James Version, I guess you could say, changed the game. And this book actually confirms the accuracy and legitimacy of the King James Version of the Bible. So it's very fascinating stuff, guys. If you have any questions for me at all, please let me know down in the comments below. And yeah, we'll pick back up where we left off here shortly in a couple weeks or whenever I get a chance. Because, yeah, I'm doing this all on my own dime. So I do what I can when I can, people. So hope you enjoyed this little story. And show some love, people. Because, yeah, without my viewers, like, I would have zero. I would have 0 views, and nobody would watch this and listen, and nobody would be edified or educated. But this is better than school, because you're going to learn more from self-education than you probably will at any school, especially those secular schools. But anyway, that's all I have for today. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think. Share this on your Facebook timeline, people, and it's much appreciated. So you guys have a great day.